These songs were recorded over 50 years ago, and somehow billions of people are still listening to them today. Here are the top 10 most streamed songs from each year in the 1970s. Number 10, Your Song by Elton John, 1970.
You can tell everybody this is your song.
Elton John was 23 years old when Your Song was released in October 1970, and Bernie Taupin, who wrote the lyrics, was just 19. By most accounts, Taupin wrote the words in about 10 minutes, sitting at the breakfast table at the home of music publisher Dick James. And they have barely aged a day since. The song was produced by Gus Dudgeon at Trident Studios in London, and it became the track that introduced Elton John to American audiences in a way nothing before it had managed.
This is my song, yeah, and this one's for you.
Before Your Song, John had put out a debut album, toured relentlessly, and built a small following. But American radio had not quite latched on. Then this record went to number 8 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 7 in the United Kingdom. And suddenly, there was no ignoring him. He was the young Englishman with the outsized glasses and the piano. And this was his calling card.
I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put...
What made Your Song different from most of what was on the radio in 1970 was its almost disarming simplicity. There were no hidden layers, no political subtext, no cleverness designed to impress. It was a young man telling someone that he wished he had a bigger or better gift to offer, but this song was the best he could do. That quality of genuine emotional exposure in an era when much of rock music was moving towards spectacle and complexity hit listeners in an unexpected way. The song launched not just a career, but a partnership. John and Taupin would go on to write together for the next half-century, producing some of the most enduring music in popular history. But Your Song was where it started, the first time most of the world heard what these two could do together, and there is something fitting about the fact that it still sounds exactly as it did the day it was first heard.
It may be quite simple, but...
The cultural context matters too. In 1970, rock music was in the middle of a restless period. Album-oriented rock was becoming more ambitious and sprawling. Many of the defining sounds of the era were moving toward greater complexity, greater length, and a certain studied coolness. Your Song walked in from the opposite direction. A piano, a melody, and a set of words that meant exactly what they said. No irony, no distance. Just a 23-year-old and a 19-year-old trying to tell someone they mattered.
I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down...
On Spotify, Your Song has surpassed 1 billion streams. John included it in virtually every major concert he gave across 5 decades. When he played the final stop of his farewell Yellow Brick Road tour in 2023, it was still in the set. Some songs are permanent. This is one of them.
You can tell everybody this is your song.
Number 9. Have You Ever Seen the Rain by Creedence Clearwater Revival, 1971.
Have you ever seen the rain?
Have You Ever Seen the Rain was released in January 1971 as a single from Creedence Clearwater Revival's album Pendulum, and it reached number 8 on the US Billboard Hot 100. John Fogerty wrote it. In a 1993 interview with Rolling Stone, he said it was about something he was watching happen in real time. The slow disintegration of his own band. Creedence Clearwater Revival had been one of the most commercially successful American groups of the previous 3 years. They had put out 5 albums since 1968, with several reaching the top 5, and all of it was quietly falling apart. Tom Fogerty, John's older brother and the band's rhythm guitarist, left in February 1971. The same month the single charted. The tension had been building throughout the recording of Pendulum, and John wrote the song as an attempt to put language to that particular experience, the feeling of something collapsing from the inside, while appearing from the outside to be fine. Rain falling on a sunny day, a storm arriving in clear weather. What the public heard, of course, was not a breakup song. They heard something melodic and aching and deeply comforting. The kind of track that sounds like it has always existed, like it has always been playing somewhere. It became one of the most familiar songs in American radio history, turning up in road trip playlists and film soundtracks and sports montages for decades without anyone seeming to tire of it. CCR dissolved formally in 1972, just over a year after the song came out. John Fogerty spent years in litigation over the band's recordings and royalties, and the story of Creedence Clearwater Revival ended in bitterness that has never fully resolved. None of that is audible in the song. It just sounds like a summer morning. In March 2023, it became the oldest song ever to surpass 1 billion streams on Spotify, a distinction it held at that point. It now has over 2 billion. A record about an ending has spent more than 50 years accumulating new beginnings.
Have you ever seen rain?
Number 8, Rocket Man, by Elton John, 1972. Bernie Taupin wrote the words to Rocket Man after being moved by a short story from Ray Bradbury's 1951 collection, The Illustrated Man. The story, also called The Rocket Man, imagined a future in which space travel had become an ordinary profession, unglamorous, repetitive, and hard on families. The astronaut in Bradbury's tale has mixed feelings about his work. He loves what he does, but recognizes what it costs him. Taupin also acknowledged drawing from another song called Rocket Man, written by Tom Rapp and recorded by Pearls Before Swine in 1970. The song was recorded at Chateau d'Hérouville in France in January 1972 and mixed at Trident Studios in London. It was released as a single on April 17, 1972, ahead of the Honky Chateau album it would anchor. It reached number 2 in the United Kingdom and number 6 on the US Billboard Hot 100, at that point Elton's highest American chart placement. The album itself became his first number 1 record in the United States. What the song did that almost nothing else in its era managed was give the romantic imagery of space travel an entirely domestic, even melancholy perspective. The astronaut was not a hero. He was a working man with a family, leaving on a Tuesday, burning out in the dark, feeling lonely in a way that the grandeur of outer space somehow amplified rather than resolved. The contrast between the scale of the setting and the ordinariness of the emotion was precisely the point. Over the decades since its release, Rocket Man has appeared in films, television series, advertising campaigns, and in 2019, as the title of the Elton John biographical film. In 2012, an astronaut aboard the International Space Station told the European Space Agency that it was one of the most played songs on the station. Elton John performed it at Live Aid in 1985 and at the launch of Space Shuttle Discovery in 1998. On Spotify, Rocket Man has over 1.4 billion streams, the most of any song released in 1972. Number 7, Dream On, by Aerosmith, 1973. Steven Tyler started building the musical foundation of Dream On when he was a teenager, years before Aerosmith existed. His father was a classically trained musician, and Tyler spent his childhood in a household where music was a constant. He has described lying under the family's Steinway piano as a child, listening to his father play. The chord sequence he developed during those years became the backbone of the song, and he carried it with him into the band's earliest rehearsals. Aerosmith released their self-titled debut album on January 5th, 1973, on Columbia Records. Dream On was released as the album's single in June 1973 and peaked at number 59 nationally. In Boston, where the band had built its base, the song was a different kind of success. It topped the year-end chart at local radio station WBZ-FM. But nationally, the record sold poorly, and Columbia had released it the same month as Bruce Springsteen's debut album, directing most of their promotional energy toward Springsteen. For over 2 years, the song existed mainly as a Boston phenomenon. Then, in late 1975, the full-length album version was reissued as a national single. By April 1976, it had climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. Aerosmith's first national top 10 hit, arriving 3 full years after the original release. By then, the band had already recorded Toys in the Attic and established themselves as one of the premier American hard rock acts. The reissue found an audience that was ready for it. The song builds from a spare piano figure, that same chord progression Tyler had been developing since adolescence, into a full rock arrangement, with his vocal reaching its peak in the final moments. Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic called it the blueprint for the power ballad. The quiet beginning, the gradual escalation, the screaming finale. Those elements appear in dozens of songs made in the decade that followed, and many that came after. On Spotify, Dream On has over 1.5 billion streams. For a song that entered the national chart at 59 in 1973, that number represents one of the longer second acts in popular music history. Number 6. Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynyrd, 1974. The backstory to Sweet Home Alabama has been debated for 50 years, and it is worth getting right. Lynyrd Skynyrd wrote the song as a direct response to Neil Young's Southern Man in Alabama, which the band felt painted the entire American South as a monolith without nuance. Young's name appears in the lyrics. The song became widely read as a defense of the South and of Alabama Governor George Wallace, who is mentioned by name. Ronnie Van Zant, the band's lead singer, was more ambivalent than that reading suggested, and accounts of what the lyrics actually intended have varied over the years. The song's complexity was real, even if most listeners never stopped to examine it. Whatever the subtext, the musical impact was undeniable from the first day the record was available. The opening guitar riff, played by Ed King, is among the most instantly recognizable sequences in rock history. The moment those 3 chords come through a speaker, the song announces itself. That quality of instant recognition is rare, and Sweet Home Alabama has had it since 1974. The single reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, the band's highest charting record at that point, and established Lynyrd Skynyrd as a national act rather than a southern regional one. The album it came from, Second Helping, cemented that standing. Ronnie Van Zant died on October 20th, 1977, when the plane carrying Lynyrd Skynyrd crashed in a swamp near Gillsburg, Mississippi. He was 29 years old. Guitarist Steve Gaines and 3 others also died in the crash. Van Zant had made Sweet Home Alabama 3 years earlier, and it had already become the song by which he would be permanently identified. Number 5. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, 1975. When Bohemian Rhapsody was submitted for release in October of 1975, the conventional wisdom at EMI Records was that it had no chance as a commercial single. It ran nearly 6 minutes. Its structure changed 3 times, a piano ballad giving way to a mock operatic section, then collapsing into hard rock, then resolving in a quiet coda. There was no recognizable chorus. Radio programmers in that era were not in the habit of running 6-minute records with operatic middle sections. Freddie Mercury, Queen, and their manager, John Reid, disagreed. DJ Kenny Everett received an advance copy, played it against instructions, and the listener response was immediate and overwhelming. Bohemian Rhapsody entered the UK chart and went to number 1, staying there for 9 consecutive weeks. The song was written entirely by Mercury and recorded during the summer of 1975 at Rockfield Studio in Wales and Sarm East Studios in London. The multi-layered vocal passages in the operatic section were built up over weeks of overdubs, with Mercury, Roger Taylor, and Brian May singing their parts repeatedly until the magnetic tape was physically degrading from use. The constraints of the technology imposed a kind of deliberateness that left nothing careless in the final recording. In the United States, the song peaked at number 9 on its original 1975 release. Then, in 1992, it was used in the film Wayne's World, which sent it back up the American charts, reaching number 2 17 years after its initial release. That gap between original release and re-entry to the top 10 remains the longest in American chart history. The 2018 biographical film of the same name brought another surge of listeners. But the song had never truly stopped accumulating them. On Spotify, Bohemian Rhapsody sits at over 3 billion streams. By a wide margin, the most streamed song of the entire 1970s and the most streamed 1980 song on the platform. The record company that feared it would fail is long gone. The song is still here. Number 4. Dancing Queen by ABBA, 1976. Dancing Queen was performed in public for the first time on June 18, 1976, at a royal gala at the Swedish Opera in Stockholm, arranged in honor of King Carl XVI Gustav and his fiancée Sylvia Sommerlath, who were married the following day. It was the song's debut before any audience, played for a Swedish royal wedding celebration. Given what it became in the decades that followed, there is something fitting about that beginning. The song was written and produced by Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus, with lead vocals by Agnetha Fältskog and Annie Frid Lyngstad. It was released in Sweden in August 1976 and went to number 1 in over a dozen countries. In the United States, it reached the top of the Billboard Hot 100, the only ABBA single to ever do so. The group had been building toward this peak since their Eurovision victory in 1974 with Waterloo, and Dancing Queen was the fullest expression of everything that made them impossible to ignore. The song opens with a piano phrase that Anderson has said was partly inspired by the Dr. John recording of Right Place, Wrong Time. The disco beat, the gospel-inflected vocal harmonies, the rising chord structure, every element was designed to produce a specific feeling, and it did. ABBA were not a band who stumbled into greatness. They were meticulous craftsmen who understood exactly what they were building, and Dancing Queen was the clearest proof of that. ABBA disbanded in 1982. For years afterward, their music held an ambiguous place in critical esteem, adored by the public, somewhat condescended to by serious critics. That began to change in the 1990s, accelerated dramatically with the success of the Mamma Mia stage musical in 1999, and the films that followed, and completed its turn when all 4 original members returned in 2021 with new recordings for the first time in nearly 4 decades. Dancing Queen was already the undisputed centerpiece of their legacy, and it needed no reassessment. On Spotify, the song sits at nearly 1.9 billion streams. Every September, it surges across social media and streaming platforms in a way that only genuinely timeless recordings manage. At this point, it is simply part of the permanent repertoire of popular music. Number 3, Hotel California by Eagles, 1977. The Hotel California album was released in December 1976, but the title track was released as a single on February 22, 1977, which is why it belongs here in 1977. The song was written by Don Felder, Don Henley, and Glenn Frey. Felder developed the original music as an instrumental demo while renting a house on Malibu Beach, recorded the basic structure at home, and handed copies to Henley and Frey to develop into something with words. Henley and Frey wrote the lyrics as their interpretation of what Los Angeles felt like from the inside. The seduction, the glamour, the sense that getting what you wanted might be worse than not getting it at all. The hotel in the song is not a real place. It is a metaphor for the whole arrangement. Henley has described it in various interviews as being about America's relationship with excess and about the specific world he and Frey were living in during the mid-1970s. The song runs over 6 minutes, which was unusual for a radio hit in that era. It closes with a guitar passage, a 2-minute exchange between Felder and Joe Walsh that has been voted among the greatest solos in rock history by multiple publications over the years. The record won the Grammy for Record of the Year in 1978 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1977. 3 million copies were shipped as singles. The Eagles were the most commercially successful American band of the decade, and Hotel California is the song that most completely captures what made them that. Technically immaculate, emotionally complicated, and built to last. On Spotify, Hotel California has over 2 billion streams. It is one of only 3 1970s songs to have crossed that threshold, and it shows no signs of declining. Number 2. September by Earth, Wind & Fire, 1978. September was released on November 18, 1978, as a new track included on the Best of Earth, Wind & Fire Volume 1. It had not appeared anywhere before. It was written specifically to give the compilation original material. The song was written by Maurice White, Al McKay, and Allie Willis. Willis was a relatively unknown songwriter when White brought her into the project. She arrived at the studio. White played her the opening guitar intro, and she knew from the first notes that something was there. The single went to number 1 on the US Billboard Hot R&B Songs chart and reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. In the United Kingdom, it peaked at number 3. It sold well, was warmly received, and then did something unusual. It became more listened to with each passing decade rather than less. Part of that has to do with the sheer quality of the arrangement. The horn parts, the rhythm section, the vocal performances, and the layered energy of the production. But a significant part of it is also the phenomenon of September 21st. The date referenced in the song's opening became, in the internet era, an annual event. Every September 21st, the song surges across playlists and social media as a kind of shared acknowledgement. Content creator Demi Adejuyigbe made a celebrated series of annual videos built around the date, and each one introduced the song to another generation that had not grown up with it. In 2018, the Library of Congress added September to its National Recording Registry, placing it among recordings deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant to the United States. That recognition reflects something that the streaming numbers also reflect. This is not a song that people merely remember. It is a song they return to. On Spotify, September has over 2.2 billion streams, the most of any 1978 release. Earth, Wind & Fire included it on a greatest hits compilation as original material, essentially a bonus track. It ended up being one of the most played songs they ever recorded. Number 1, Don't Stop Me Now, by Queen, 1979. Don't Stop Me Now was written entirely by Freddie Mercury and released as a single in January 1979 from the album Jazz, which had been recorded at Mountain Studios in Montreux, Switzerland. The song is a relentless, tempo-driven declaration of pure energy. Mercury piling image upon image, each more extravagant than the last, all converging on the same point. Nothing is going to slow this down. On its original release, the song peaked at number 9 in the United Kingdom. It was not the centerpiece of Queen's 1979 commercial activity. Bohemian Rhapsody had been the cultural event in 1975. We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You had arrived in 1977. Don't Stop Me Now was one of many singles from a prolific band during a busy period, and it charted respectably without making a thunderclap. What happened over the following decades was a slow and thorough reassessment. The song began turning up on best-of lists with increasing frequency. It appeared in films and television series. In a 2005 survey conducted for Guinness World Records, it was voted the greatest song to drive to. In 2019, researchers at Manchester Metropolitan University published an analysis attempting to quantify the musical elements of feel-good songs: tempo, key, chord progressions, melodic shape, lyrical content, and concluded that Don't Stop Me Now was, by their analysis, the most effective feel-good song ever recorded. Its BPM is 156, precisely in the range that most listeners experience as energizing. Mercury died on November the 24th, 1991, at the age of 45. He had been diagnosed with AIDS and announced it publicly the day before he died. In the years after his death, Don't Stop Me Now became one of the primary musical expressions of his legacy, a song about refusing to be stopped, written by a man whose life was eventually stopped far too young. The combination of what the song says and what happened to the man who sang it gave it a weight that musical analysis alone cannot fully account for. Brian May and Roger Taylor, the surviving members of Queen, have continued to tour with vocalist Adam Lambert since 2011, and the song is performed at every concert. Audiences who never saw Mercury perform it know every word. That is, in some ways, the most remarkable fact about Don't Stop Me Now. It has found its way to people across generations and across the entire distance of time since it was made, and it still sounds like it was written for the exact moment in which you hear it. On Spotify, Don't Stop Me Now has over 2.5 billion streams, the most of any song released in 1979, and the second most streamed song from the entire decade, behind only Bohemian Rhapsody. The fact that both the first and second place songs of the 1970s came from the same band says something about Queen's particular hold on the streaming generation. People who were born after the decade ended, and in many cases, after Mercury was already gone. He never got to see what became of it. The song that was written one summer in Switzerland in 1978 has been played by billions of people across 5 decades, and it is still being discovered. Those were the top 10 most streamed songs from each year in the 1970s. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find content like this. We'll see you in the next one.